One of my recent videos was on Muscle Fibers 101, and in that video I stated that this is sort of an introduction to energy systems. So before I move to energy system information, I would like to get that bit out of the way. So today's one is the energy systems introduction. So we're just going to look at an introduction. It's going to be it's going to be very simple. I'm going to simplify it as much as I can, try and keep it within the 15-minute range if possible. It'll probably be around then, and just go over exactly the different systems that are used, a few myths, and explain some guys train them. Just example workouts you can do. I probably will go into everything individually again down the line and break them up into their own PowerPoints. So, for example, your anaerobic system or your that I probably go into all of those individually on their own in their own PowerPoint. So we're going to go over an introduction to the three systems, a breakdown of each system, and then just example workouts for each breakdown. So it's going to be very simple. So the first one is the Phosphagen ATPPC system. So this is your lactic system. It's your primary anaerobic energy system, and it is the energy you use without oxygen. So it's high power, low sustainability, and examples of that are high intensity activities such as your 1 rep max or 40-yard sprint. So that 6-second range. Or less. Usually they say 8 seconds or less. It's anywhere really from 0 to 8. But yeah, this is your pure anaerobic system. You've often seen these trained with a 20-meter sprint and maybe minutes rest, 5 minutes rest, 3 minutes rest. It depends kind of what you're trying to elicit in that session. But these are the very long rest to very short maximal efforts. Next, your glycolytic system. This is your lactic system. It's your secondary anaerobic system, which predominates energy activities lasting 20 seconds to 2 minutes. So a bit of a gap there. It's moderate power, moderate sustainability. Its primary fuel source comes from a breakdown of blood glucose and glycogen. So at halftime or in the middle of games or in the middle of events where you see people have those gels or fruits or sweets or jellies or sugars, that's just getting some glucose into the blood and some fast acting carbs. So a typical example of this is your 400-meter sprint, which obviously isn't a maximal sprint. It's just a 400-meter time trial. So this is your typical example. It could range anywhere from a minute to a minute and a half maybe if you're quite fit. That would be a typical example. Next, we're moving into the oxidative system. So this is your aerobic system, a primary fuel source used during low intensity activities. This is the energy you use with oxygen. It's low power, high sustainability, so something you can do for quite a long time without producing vast amount of power in. Its primary fuel source comes from carbs and fats. There are protein used too. Of course, their protein can be used for energy, but the primary fuel source traditionally will come through carbs and fats, and it's any activity lasting longer than 2 minutes. So it's the most used activity in our sport, which is GAA. So an energy system myth. It is a common belief that energy systems work independently of each other and that people often talk about training one energy system, but the reality is that all systems work at all times, not separately. Again, going back to a point I've touched on in previous slides or previous videos, that the body is one piece. So just because you're working one specific body part, one specific energy system, it has that knock-on effect, that ripple effect to the rest of your body. Your body is one piece. Depending on the method of training, it is possible that one system is working more, but it's never working alone. So the ATPPC system, this is, we're going to look at different guidelines for what would be known as traditionally ATPPC power programming and capacity programming. So the power guidelines, we're going to look at the bottom, just kind of guidelines to go by. It improves your regeneration ability, so your ability to regenerate between bursts of pace. And this is working anywhere from 7 to 10 seconds, and could be 2 to 5 minutes off. So an example of this is 5 sets of an 8-second maximal sprint, rest 3 minutes. You could even rest 4 minutes there. A lot of people do this with heart rate monitors, and they won't go again until their heart rate is below a certain number for a certain period of time. But for most of us who just have watches, it's simple to make sure your work to rest ratio is quite large. So 10 to 1 is usually good, or even as far as 20 to 1. But something I'm hearing quite a lot lately is that for every 10 meters you sprint, you should rest at least a minute for every 10 meters. So 30-meter sprint, if you make your 30 meters in 8 seconds, 3 minutes rest should be the protocol. So capacity guidelines, this helps improve your ability to sustain power. So it's a little bit longer of bursts. 10 to 15 seconds on, 30 to 90 seconds off. An example workout would be every 3 minutes for 15 minutes, 15 sec max assault bike cals. So you would have 1 minute and 45 rest there. 2 minutes and 45 seconds rest. But it would be 15 seconds max work. And you would be going as hard as you physically can each time, even if your power output drops towards the latter rounds. Glycolytic system is next. So again, looking at power and capacity. Power guidelines. Here we're looking for max intensity on each set. So you got your 20 to 40 seconds on, 1 to 3 minutes off. So you can see the work time is creeping up a bit. The rest time is staying in and around the same. So an example of this would be 5 sets of 30 seconds working on the rower as hard as you can. 90 seconds total rest. So 30 seconds max on the rower should feel different to your 10 or 15 second max on a rower. Like the pace will drop a bit. It's the max you can sustain and the max you can go for that time. I would say the best thing to do is go all out for the first set or two and just try hold on then. The 90-second rest does get very short into the latter rounds. So capacity guidelines next. This is your ability to sustain anaerobic production. So you'd have anywhere between 1 to 3 minutes on and 30 to 120 seconds off. This is an incomplete rest. At most 1 to 1. So you want to have incomplete rest here. This is where you want to push the lid a little bit more, and as your time of working goes up, your time of rest comes down that little bit more so than the power one above. So an example would be putting 30 minutes on the clock, having a track or a route and saying, right, I'm going to run 600 meters and my work to rest ratio is going to be 1 to 1. So if that 600 meters takes me 2 minutes, I'm resting 2 minutes and going again, and you get as many rounds of those done as you can, keeping to a strict 1 to 1 work to rest ratio in a 30-minute window. Oxidative system, we have 2 different methods here we're going to go over, is the cardiac output method and intense intervals. Now with the oxidative system there is a lot more than this. I'm just going to go through 2 examples just to keep it simple for you guys, on 2 different ways you can work your oxidative system. So the cardiac output method, this improves your heart's ability to deliver oxygen. This can be anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes, and people would advise a minimum of 30 minutes. Keeping your heart rate between 130 to 150 beats per minute. And it's usually monostructural work, so simple stuff like running, walking, carrying, hiking, rowing, bike, swim, different things like that on the skier. So 30 to 60 minutes could be as simple as just doing 45 minutes of a jog, keeping your heart rate between those. Or what you could do is 15 minutes on a bike, 15 minutes on a skier, 15 minutes on a rower, all keeping your heart rate within a certain level. So it can be quite boring to do one thing, and unless you, let's say, if you have a specific sport where you're on your feet, maybe it's better to be doing the running. But if you're just generally trying to work this system, any means necessary, to be honest. I would even incorporate some carries there. So you could do 10 minutes of carry variations, just where you're moving a weight from point A to point B in different modes. So you could do farmer's walk, suitcase walk, overhead walk, bear crawl, different things like that. That's going to keep your heart rate elevated, somewhere between 130 to 150 beats per minute. It's not going to kill you out of it, but it's going to elevate your heart rate to that. Then you could break for a minute, jump onto a bike, an assault bike or a spin bike, keep your heart rate, and then you could go for a jog. Again, 30 minutes minimum. The next one is intervals. So this stimulates greater oxygen utilization. This can be anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes work. It's about keeping your heart rate constant, but keeping it at bay at the same time. So you want to get a bulk load of work done here, but you don't want to slow down. You don't want your heart rate to spike up. You want to just keep it at a steady pace, a sustainable pace. So 15 minutes on the clock, 5 rounds, 1 minute lunge, 1 minute push-up, 1 minute bike, and just continuously go through those. Every time the clock hits a minute, just change the station nice and slow and keep moving. Again, some of these things might spike your heart rate. You could change the push-ups to shoulder taps. You could change the lunges to air squats, whichever. It doesn't matter too much. This type of work is using strength movements or body weight movements, or pairing different modalities, which would be known as mixed modality training, to elicit a response in your oxidative system. So even though a lot of people use this in their workouts, and I would use this with a few different people as well, where they're working two things. So on one side, they're working their oxidative system, their aerobic system, and on the other side, we're working on some skill work. So that might be, look like this: 20 minutes on the clock, right? We got chin-ups as a weakness. We want to get better. You've got 2 chin-ups. Maybe then we go into some bear crawls or some alternating dumbbell snatches or something that's going to be kind of light, simple to do, low skill, keeps the heart rate up, and then maybe a minute of cardio thrown in there or whatever. But this is just constantly moving through different modalities is how people usually train this. But again, these are only just 2 examples of a very, very wide topic that can be talked about that I will be coming back to. Again, this is going to be a PowerPoint on its own down the line. So that is basically it. I'm going to keep it nice and short. Energy system simplified. There's a lot more to be talked about with each individual energy system, as I just explained, and I will come to that down the line. But I think if you can get a grasp of the basics, so the differences between, if you're playing a field sport, let's say for example, again, I'm going to refer back to the usual GAA, you're going to need to see what is your specific goal. So are you playing a midfielder role who connects ball from A to B, who does a lot of man marking or a lot of tracking? Are you a full forward who needs to be very fast over the first few yards, who doesn't really do much backtracking or wouldn't have the job of coming out the field? You know, figure out what your role is, figure out what you need, train everything, of course, especially in the off season, but really nail down on the things you need. And I hope these guidelines can help you